PowerPoint's pretty much ubiquitous in corporate America. At the same time, it has kind of a bad reputation to the point where death by PowerPoint is a thing. And usually that refers to boring slides that are filled with text, people putting up 50-line spreadsheets on a slide that nobody can read anything, and all these sort of misuses of PowerPoint. But Amazon banned PowerPoint from their, or at least many of their internal presentations, if not all, and not because they're so incredibly boring, but because it could be too persuasive. Explain that concept of how PowerPoint can actually be maybe a little bit too effective, but also why Amazon dropped it in favor of narratives, written narratives.
Yeah, Amazon dropped PowerPoint in favor of written narratives for decision-making meetings. So Amazon still uses PowerPoints for things like all hands or when it's a one-to-many broadcasting, to a group. A VP gets in front of a group. But for decision-making forums where you're looking at a body of information, it was back in 2004, we were using PowerPoint just like everyone else. And we realized that as the business was getting complex, we weren't making the high quality decisions that we wanted to. And Jeff just said, okay, starting, and it was at his management team meetings. It was held once a week on Tuesdays. And it was a 4-hour meeting, and there were about 2 to 3 teams that would come in and present. And it was actually a Wednesday. I remember that day of the week, he said, okay, starting for next week, we're going to try narratives. And one thing that was notable is it was an experiment. We realized that PowerPoint wasn't really working for us, or slides. And we could have always gone back if the narrative idea didn't work. But Jeff has said later since called this move one of the best things that Amazon did. And it removes bias, really, and it removes the presentation bias. And you can have, for an example, is you can have a charismatic speaker who has a so-so idea or even a bad idea and can convince a group or an organization to go forward with that, not maliciously, but it's just not a great idea. And a great presenter can convince a group of people. The flip side is you can have someone who has an awesome idea, but is just not a great presenter. It could be a boring presentation, and you may skip over something. And often when people ask about a slide presentation afterwards, well, how did it go? They say, oh, the presenter was really engaging, or the presentation was boring. But at the end of the day, customers don't really care how the meeting went in terms of the presentation. They care that the company took an idea and took an action that would make their lives better, either through creating a product or a feature and rolling out something that enhances their lives. And so Amazon switched to use narratives just because it can convey a lot more information in the same unit time, at least 10x. If you look at pixel density, it can handle the multi-causal relationships versus, hierarchical slide. A presentation doesn't do that. And what it has allowed Amazon to do is that the leaders stay connected to a broader range of businesses at a much deeper level. If you go into it, spend an hour in a narrative meeting or an hour in a slide meeting, same hour, but you get about 10 times as much information. So on average, you're going to make better decisions with the former versus the latter. So those are a couple reasons that Amazon, tried it. It was an experiment, and it worked so well that they continue to use it. And it wasn't just for Jeff's staff meetings. This is another example of, something's a good process when it's easy to implement, it's teachable. And then you don't really have to have huge auditing mechanisms to make sure it's being followed. Leaders at Amazon just realized this was a more effective decision-making tool for them than slides. And so they started adopting it on their own. And now you get to the point where if you started to put a slide up, people would scratch their heads and say at Amazon, well, what are you doing? Let's end this meeting and go start writing a narrative.
I hope you enjoyed this Brainfluence brief. If you didn't, help me out by telling me why in a comment. But if you did find some value, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. The full episode is available on YouTube and audio outlets like Apple, Spotify, and Google. Visit rogerdooley.com/podcast for a formatted text version plus links and other resources. Thanks for tuning in.